Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I have your very first gameplay and overview of the XF5U-1 Flying Flapjack. This is a currently rank 4 battle rating 5.3 premium naval fighter in the American Air Tech tree, and is of course the top vehicle reward for War Thunder's 13th anniversary Dreams Come True event. And like other Dreams Come True vehicles, this thing is weird. So as you can see, it really lives up to the nickname of Flying Flapjack. If you guys didn't know, the Flying Pancake was kind of a developmental version of this that helped in aiding the design process of the XF5U-1. Now this vehicle is extremely strange, not only because of its shape, but also look where the engines are mounted. Right here, yeah. So it has an extra long 90-degree angle propeller shaft, which is just completely crazy. And these engines by themselves really aren't overly powerful either. So that kind of lends to its mediocre performance. And you might say to yourself, well, it's got a 708 km/h top speed. That's not really mediocre, but realistically speaking, you're probably not going to be hitting much more than 400, maybe 425 on a good day with this thing. And that's if you're just kind of flying flat and even. Now in a dive, this thing is absolutely amazing. You can hit upwards of 850 km/h in a dive without it braking, but that's pretty much it. Otherwise, its rate of climb kind of sucks. It has an amazing turn rate for like the one turn that you can do before you bleed all of your energy. Then you may as well be a sitting duck. Now that said, we do have ourselves 6 M2 Brownings right here alongside the cockpit right next to the fuel tank, which by the way is not self-sealing, which will lead to a lot of continuous fires. And these do have the capability to carry the extra good late war M20 armor-piercing incendiary tracer belt ammo, which is just fantastic. You will set your enemies ablaze with this so long as, of course, you hit them. And you also have 2 1,000-pound bombs and 2 500-pound bombs. But as I said before, this vehicle is really not fantastic. But let's get into a few matches, see what we can do. I am going to record the gameplay and then kind of do post-game audio, if you will, commentary. That way it's a bit cleaner and a bit quicker, so you can get about the same amount of video for less time. As said, let's get into it. So just to kind of start here, the XF5U-1 is, in my opinion, not very good. And even though its stat card looks okay, it has a decent rate of climb. Its turn time, as some of you guys know, turn times can be very deceptive on the stat card. It has a pretty good max speed of 708 km/h. But realistically speaking, you're probably never going to be able to get anywhere near that 708 km/h top speed. The turn time is excellent until, again, you get past that first turn, and then you have absolutely no speed. Imagine the J-35A, or really any of the J-35s, or even like a MiG-21, like kind of that style of aircraft. Now put it with propellers, and that's kind of the amount of energy bleed that you're talking about. And these are pretty weak engines too, relatively speaking, for an aircraft of this size. Bear in mind, this vehicle weighs, I think, something like 30 to 50% more than a Corsair. So it really doesn't have sufficient power to be a naval fighter, and it just doesn't have enough power to come out of those turns for you to be able to kind of continue on with enemies. Like, you can more or less kind of keep up with a Spitfire in one turn, but the thing is, that Spitfire is going to be able to continue to turn, whereas you can't. You go from like 600 km/h if you somehow gain that much speed in a dive to like 350 literally in a split second, or from 400 to like 200 again in about 1 or 2 seconds, which is absolutely killer. And then again, mix in those mediocre-ish engines. They're not absolutely terrible, but in my opinion, they're not very good. And you really just have an aircraft that you can kill 1, maybe 2 enemies if you're lucky, but you really have to hope that no one else is there, because kind of like the F-106, once you kind of get into a turning fight with this thing, you're done. You know, you pretty much have to just go in, get the kill, and run away. That's more or less what this thing is good at, the XF5U-1. And speaking of, if you can get yourself a pretty decent altitude, a pretty decent position at the beginning of a match, it doesn't really have the worst rate of climb. So even though its top speed really isn't all that good, this thing actually gets off the runway pretty well, and its rate of climb is, it's okay. It's pretty mediocre-ish. It's like a 4.5 out of 10, maybe, give or take. But you can still get yourself to an altitude, and there's going to be enemies that inevitably are much lower altitude than you. The XF5U-1 actually is a very good boom and zoomer. This thing has excellent vertical authority, so to speak, so you can more or less kind of control your pitch very, very well with this thing. And the rudders surprisingly aren't too terrible, at least in my opinion, in my somewhat limited playing of this vehicle. And so you actually have an aircraft that does pretty damn well from an altitude, jumping on enemies that are much, much lower altitude than you, but that's pretty much the niche that this thing lives in. And again, it can survive upwards of 850 kilometers per hour, give or take. I wouldn't really try much more than 825, near-ish to sea level, but I think I've gotten around 850 before this thing actually starts breaking apart, which is above what most aircraft in game around this BR can do. So it actually does dive quite well, and it's a pretty heavy plane, which again kind of aids with its energy gain towards the ground. It's just, once you start getting into those turning matches, this thing's toast. So despite the allure of turning with this thing, you really probably shouldn't. And to be quite honest with you, even though this thing is currently and I keep saying this thing, I mean the XF5U-1 Flying Pancake, or the Flying Flapjack, even though this vehicle is 5.3 BR, I could again very easily see it being 4.7, maybe even 4.3 in the future. Probably not 4.3, but honestly, I would rather have a P47, like a 4.3 BR P47. So we're talking like the D25. I would probably rather have that at 5.3 BR than the XF5U-1. Like, yeah, I know I'm a big fan of the P47s, but to be quite honest with you, I think it's just a much better aircraft. Now, do I think that the XF5U sucks? Not really. I think it's a meme vehicle, and kind of like all dreams come true vehicles, it's not absolutely terrible. Like, for example, the TOG that we had for Great Britain a few years ago, I thought that was actually a very fun vehicle, and if you could actually make it to the battlefield before the match ends, it's actually quite good. 94 millimeter 28 pounder was excellent. The Stormtiga, not a very useful vehicle, but if you actually manage to hit an enemy and you don't die, you can get yourself a few kills. I've actually gotten numerous double kills with that thing with a single drop. And then, of course, I think you had maybe like the PO2 or something last year. I forget what last year's vehicle was. But anyways, the XF5U, it's not absolutely terrible. Like, this is better than the Churchill AVRE Petard that they had a few years ago, or like a year or two ago, whenever that was. It's a much better vehicle than that, but it's still not very good. And that's kind of difficult for me to say, because I typically believe that most vehicles in War Thunder are at least decent. This vehicle is a bit below decent. I'd say it's a pretty mediocre aircraft, largely due to its energy bleed characteristics, and then of course due to the engines not being able to bring it back up to power. Somehow this thing gets right off the runway pretty much quicker than almost any other plane in and around its BR that you'll have coming off, again, the airfield. But beyond that, that's pretty much about the most impressive thing about it. And it does have a pretty nice armament of, again, 6 M2 Brownings, which are pretty nice. And it has 2,400 rounds of ammunition. They're all pretty much center mounted, which is also nice. You have the armor-piercing incendiary tracers, which are fantastic. This is actually pretty decent if you can manage to get a few hits on enemy aircraft, but again, that's a big if. It's not very fast, and once you lose your energy, you are a sitting duck. Now, of course, you can use this for anti-ground. You can use 2 1,000-pound bombs, which is pretty cool. In my opinion, it's not too bad. And they are center-mounted, which is, again, good. In my opinion, center-mounted bombs are actually really, really easy to use, but again, you're using a relatively slow aircraft. This thing bleeds speed so quickly, where it's like, yeah, in theory, you can use this versus air or versus ground targets, but you may as well just use, again, a P-47, in my opinion. Like, the P-47 does whatever the XF5U can do, but better. Or if you're using the American ground tech tree or the American air tech tree, you know, you also have plenty of other aircraft as well. If you want to go for a premium, you have the XA-38 Grizzly for ground attack. You even have your P-40s or your P-51s. You have your Bearcats, your F4Us. You even have, if you want to go up and BR a little bit, the AD-2. So, I mean, it just feels that the XF5U, at its own BR, pretty much everything is better than it at whatever it can do. There's nothing that the XF5U does as well as or better than compared to any other aircraft at and around its BR. And so it's a fun vehicle, it's a funny looking vehicle, but it can get really frustrating really quick because, quite honestly, it just doesn't have enough power. It doesn't have enough horsepower to be able to propel itself quickly enough and to be able to come back from all the energy lost when taking turns, that this thing could be good. So with that said, let me know what you guys think about this vehicle in the comments below. Again, I felt like this would be a relatively short video. It's a cool aircraft. I'm glad they added it to War Thunder, but personally, I don't see myself using it too much beyond this update, beyond this event, because it's just not really all that great unless, or until rather, they reduce its BR. Then it might be a touch more competitive. But that said, again, thanks for watching. I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.